Colleagues, today we've had an intensive day from the point of view of discussions of the Ukrainian crisis. I won't repeat what I said this morning at the General Assembly. I can only state with regret that taking stock of the day, our signals to Kiev about the need to stop provocations against Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics were not heeded. It would appear that our Ukrainian colleagues, who recently have been actively armed and egged on by a host of states, are still harbouring the illusion that, with the benediction of their Western sponsors, they will be able to achieve a military solution to the problem in the Donbass. Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the substantial intensification of shelling and acts of diversion on the territory of these republics. The Special Monitoring Mission of the OSCE recorded today almost 2,000 cases of violations of the ceasefire regime, including almost 1,500 explosions. Those living in Donetsk and Lugansk still sheltering in basements. The refugees are still flowing into Russia. In a word, the nature of the provocation by the Ukrainian military has not changed. You don't want to notice this, repeating the Ukrainian fairy tales that those living in Donetsk are all but shelling themselves. It is no surprise that the increasing suffering of those living in the Donbass does not seem to affect our Western colleagues. Through the whole day of debate today at the General Assembly, you haven't been able to find one word of compassion or condolences. It is as if these 4 million people for you simply don't exist. How would like to recall that the principle of sovereignty and territorial equality of states and territorial integrity of states, in violation of which we are being accused of violating in Ukraine today, according to the Declaration on the Principles of International Law pertaining to friendly relations between peoples, adopted in 1970, this should be fully complied with as regards states who, and I quote, conduct themselves in compliance with the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and thus possessed of a government representing the whole people without distinction of race, creed or colour, the whole people living in that territory. End of quote. Today's government in Ukraine simply is not that. And the tragedy in Ukraine started indeed after the illegal coup in Maidan in 2014, when, rather than dialogue with the Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine, the new authorities brandished guns and airplanes at them. The information and testimony to this end is more than sufficient. However, our Western colleagues prefer not to notice this. We tried yesterday and today, before yesterday, to explain to you the logic of the decision made by Russia to recognise the LPR and DPR. And we focused on the need to ensure peace and security there. However, you didn't want to hear this, and you don't want to hear it now. For you, those living in the Donbass are simply pawns in a geopolitical game focused on weakening Russia and promoting the bloc from NATO to its borders. For us, these people are women, children, the elderly, who for 8 years have been cowering from Ukraine's shelling and provocations. For us, these are Ukraine people and not the Maidan authorities. In this is the difference in our approaches. If you do not change the geopolitical lens, you will never understand us. Then, on those on whose behalf this decision I mentioned was made, who you've not even thought about for over these 8 years, simply calling them pro-Russian separatists and terrorists. Those people are the most important for us. I'd like to say once again that the root of today's crisis around Ukraine is the actions of Ukraine itself, who for many years was sabotaging its obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Last week even, there was a hope that Kiev would rethink and nevertheless implement what it signed up to do in 2015. For this, first and foremost, they needed direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. However, further confirmation that Ukraine is not ready for this type of dialogue and steps to grant Donbass special status as set forth in the Minsk agreements, while with the support of this position from Western backers, finally convinced us that we simply cannot force those living in the Donbass to suffer more. Inasmuch as I already said, the Ukrainian provocation against those in Donbass not only has not stopped, but has intensified, the leaders of the LPR and the DPR turned to us with a request to provide military support in line with bilateral cooperation agreements as agreed at the same time as they were recognition. This is a logical step, which is a consequence of the actions of the Ukrainian regime. During this meeting, the president of Russia, Putin, spoke with and said that he made a decision for a special military operation in the Donbass. We don't know all the details today, but briefly I would like to inform you that from his statement, it says that the occupation of Ukraine is not in our plans. The aim of this special operation is to protect the people who, for over 8 years, have been suffering genocide from the Kiev regime. And for this, we will aim to demilitarize and de-genocide in Ukraine, and also support those and hold accountable those who carried out so many crimes against civilians, including citizens of the Russian Federation. This decision was made in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter and the sanction of the Russian Federation, and fulfilling the agreement on and recognition of the LPR and DPR. We're receiving a lot of information, and we will analyse this, and we will keep you up to speed with this. Now I resume my function as President of the Council, and I give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.